Hello and welcome to another Reaper blog tutorial. What's new in Reaper 6.24? That's what we're doing today, and there's a lot of changes. The big one is the new feature, razoredit. It's a really cool feature. Let's jump into it. All right, we're going to start off this changelog with a range view, display bracket over last selected track to indicate where pasted content will go. So I'm going to zoom in here so that you can see this up close. And I've got this new cursor wherever the insert point is going to be. This indicator is new, but the behavior of how things are going to be pasted has always been the same. Just for an example here, I'll put in an item and then I'll cut it. And I'll go to another track and hit paste. That's working as expected. But what if I don't have any tracks selected? Reaper is going to follow the last touch track. And without any tracks selected, you don't really have any indication until now with this new indicator. So yeah, I think everyone can see here, based on that indicator, where my next paste will go. With this track selected, V will paste there. With this track selected, V will paste there. With no tracks selected, pasting again will go to the same spot. So it's just to help you follow the insert points and things like that, because it can be a little confusing, especially if you have multiple items selected, multiple tracks that you're pasting into. It can be a little tough to follow that at times. In the theme, we've got cursor underscore cell track dot png image to customize selected track cursor bracket. So this change actually affects more than just the default theme. So if I go to my custom theme, the background colors and everything changes, but that indicator is still there. So if your custom theme doesn't have this image file, it will fall back on the default, which has this image file. There's also a new theme color for selected track background. So let's look at that. Let's go to the action list, search for theme, tweak. What we're looking for here is selected track background, odd tracks, selected track background, even tracks. So this is just, again, another indicator of track selections. We've always had on the left side, the selected tracks kind of light up, they brighten. We can customize the range view to do similar things or go extreme with the actual colors. So just for an example, I'll do an extreme color here for both of these. I'll just do two different pinks, just so it's a little, it's very obvious which track is selected. If you have multiple, it looks like this. I'll just put in a bunch more tracks. And without this function, it can be a little hard to find which track is selected. And so, yeah, this is just an optional thing you can do to tweak the track color selection. And you can make this a more subtle change like this. And it's just a lot easier to find where you are. Anytime you're making changes to the Reaper theme, it's always best to save your theme as a new file. It's going to keep all these theme development window settings in its own place. For effects, they've added LV2 plugin support. This is a format commonly used on Linux, but Ardour also uses LV2 plugins. I'm not an expert on this, never used an LV2 plugin, but I will show you the preference page here. So if you go to Preferences, LV2 under Plugins, you've got the search path, very similar to the VST, and then a couple different options for how things are named. Append mono for plugins with single input-output, append XCH for plugins with non-stereo I/O, it's like 4 channels, things like that. Append MIDI for plugins with no audio I/O, and append maintainer name, just the company name that makes it. So all of those things are optional. Next up, option to hide effects comment field in chain view. All right, so every effects chain has a comments box at the top of every plugin. So let's add in some more plugins here. I'm going to add in Black 76, and I'll add in OTT. And every plugin has this comments box. So we'll just call this vocal EQ, something like that. This area is just used as a note to yourself, and It's not really used anywhere else in Reaper. As far as I know, it's just visible there. You don't see it in the track control panel area. You don't see that in the mixer area. It's only within the effects chain window. So if you don't use that function, you want to gain back a little bit more screen space, you can go into the preferences and plugins. Here we're looking for show comment field above FX UI, and we'll just turn that off and hit OK. And yeah, this plugin window is now about a centimeter smaller on my screen, and that's going to impact every single plugin window. Again, floating windows don't have that comments field. It's only in the effects chains. Yeah, if that's a function you don't use, let's get rid of it. A couple more things to cover before we get into the Razor edits. The first one is with rescript. You can press F1 in the IDE for context-sensitive help if possible. Let's look at that. I'm going to open up the action list and find a script, just any script at all. Open this up. Let's say Reaper get media item info underscore value, and I'll press F1. And then in my browser, I've got that function here with all of the parameters and things that you can use. Context sensitive help with search, that sort of thing, is pretty neat. So let's grab another one at random. Reaper BR get closest grid division. So again, just selecting it, pressing F1 on the keyboard, and then the Reaper API on the local file for this. You don't actually need internet for this. Comes up with an explanation of that function. If you remember a few versions back, we had the option of inserting a sample into a sample player, Resamplematic 5000. There's a small change with that. The changelog says, action to insert media into active sample player looks for more recently active Resamplematic 5000 instance. And so that's just, instead of being the first one in the project, the one on the top track, it's now using the last touched sample player. And now it's time to get into Razor editing. This is a new function for Reaper. You can do quite a lot of stuff with this and just completely new types of edits than you were able to do with Reaper before. I'll try to kind of summarize this function before we actually get into the demonstration. Essentially, you're making rectangular selections with tracks and time over items and automation items, even including silence if you want. From there, you can manipulate that. You can stretch it, you can copy it, you can ripple edit, you can delete, you can do all kinds of things, and it all kind of works within those boxes. You can do some really powerful things with this, but it's not the tool for every single job. I don't think it should replace your default editing functions because it excels at very specific things, but for certain things, it may not be useful at all. So let's read the changelog. Razor edit feature to draw, move, copy, and transform selected areas of media and automation. Support moving, copying envelope areas based on envelope type or envelope via mouse modifiers. When move envelope points with items is enabled, hidden envelopes are included in area selection. Actions to insert MIDI item, empty item, click source, use Razor edit areas if exist. Option to always trim content behind Razor edits. Preferences to stretch audio items by adding stretch markers or splitting. Display move guide when editing. Auto crossfade media items at the edge of Razor edit area. Support displaying overlapping media items in lanes. When auto creating effects parameter envelopes, initialize with a current parameter value. Basic API support. Settings to snap Razor edits to media items and automation items. So there's a lot of stuff there, and kind of out of context, this doesn't make any sense. So before we get into Razor editing, I should first give some examples of what editing functions we've already had. Item-based editing, where you select an item, you can shift-click an item, we can copy this, we can click somewhere and then paste it, and it does the entire item, right? So we're editing with items and using the entire item. Then we have time-based edits with items. So we can drag in an empty area of the tracks or drag within the ruler to make a time selection. We can select our items here. So all these items are within and around the time selection. If I press a shortcut like cut within time selection, that's cut just the selected items within the time selection. If I park my cursor here and then hit paste, it's just that cropped area there. Then if we go into mouse modifiers, we can do things like time and item selections using a right drag. So that's like doing this. And so I've selected items and time range all at once. If I hit X there, that's going to cut all that stuff out and go over here and it pastes all that stuff in there. And this is how I've worked for 10 years, if not more. That's how I've been working. I link my time selection to item selection. I'll just show you this. In the mouse modifiers, arrange view, right drag, marquee select items and time. This is a very fast way of working, and for a lot of workflows, this is very good. What you miss out on is this independent item type editing where you can skip gaps. Then in Reaper 5, we got automation items where you can put a container over an automation lane, and you can move this around. You can add points to this. You can copy it and paste it and all that kind of stuff. Up until Reaper 6.24, you haven't been able to select automation on multiple tracks or on multiple lanes of the same track. So if I want to move these envelope points on the volume and the panning envelope at the same time, you have to do it separately or link it to an item. If you have items there, you just want to move the automation. You have to make an automation item over both of them and then select them both by holding Shift and clicking on each one, and then you can move them together. So kind of clunky, slow. RazoRedits combine the best parts of all of those functions. So we're using time-based editing. We're taking multiple items and envelopes and everything all at once within these boxes. I have this set up on Alt right drag. So hold down the Alt key, right drag, and I can make a box selection, and I can move that around. And I can replace things. I can copy, paste, ripple edit, duplicate. If I have silence within that that time range, there's an option to also duplicate with the time. So I'll make a new selection here, and I'll include this automation item, stuff like that. And I'll just duplicate that, and it's kept in that silent bit. I'm going to delete the automation item, but preserving the points on these two items. I'm going to do a razor edit around this, and then I can move this, and I can even put it on another track, just like that. So I can move that around. Let's duplicate that. Holding down the Alt key and going to the edge, we can shrink that area or expand it. And that works with items and automation at the same time. Never been able to do that before. Dragging the top or bottom of the razor edit will add an additional track to it. So we got this. I can drag that down. So I'm adding in another track. I'm adding in another envelope lane and another one. Just look for the different icons. So there's kind of the classic square bracket trim icons. There's this one with a up and down arrow indicating that you'll be adding to the selection. And then this gets even more powerful when you add in the fact that you can have multiple selections. So you've never been able to do multiple time selections that move together, that duplicate together, that ripple edit together, that can be moved to different tracks, all that kind of stuff. This is super powerful. All right, so here's another example. So I've got some MIDI items on this track. If I wanted to select, let's say, 3 of these and change the timing of them, I would hold down Alt and drag to change the timing, but that leaves gaps. What if we put in a razor edit around these 3 items and then hold down Alt and drag the edge? That's actually changing the timing, and it's stretching the ones outside of that to kind of fill in the gaps. So kind of a really different way of approaching that. We do that with an audio item. It's different still. So let's take this item here. And so I can do a razor edit around that and then Alt drag. And so that's using item rate to change the timing of that. Let's do a razor edit that isn't the full item, and we change the timing of that. Now let's put in stretch markers on the items before and after. So this item plays normal speed, then it gets faster, and then this last one gets slower to fill the gap. If we go into preferences and editing behavior, there's a few things here. Stretching razor edit area adds stretch markers to audio items. All right, so let's turn that off and hit OK. I'm going to drag this, and this time it's only used the item rate instead of adding in stretch markers. Changelog said display move guide when editing. So if I drag this around, you see these diagonal lines showing the original edit area. Very helpful to have that. A couple things got renamed. So if we right click on this main toolbar button, move envelope points with media items and razor edits was added to that. The changelog talks about using razor edit areas for kind of the same functions as time selections in some cases. So if I have a razor edit area and I go to the insert menu and go to new MIDI item, it's going to put in a new MIDI item within that area. Or if I undo, go to insert, click source, that's going to put that in there. And I think it's empty. Yeah, that timecode generator works like that as well. Empty item, dedicated video item, that's all going to use the razor edit area. Okay, so let's go back to the mouse modifiers. Most of your interaction with this and the way that you're going to get comfortable with this is looking at these things. For the context, arrange view, and right drag, I already showed you my default here. This factory default is to just select items, and I like to also select the time. I hold shift if I want to add items to the selection, hold control if I only want to select time. And then there's the razor edits. I have this on alt right drag to create a razor edit area. Shift alt right drag adds to razor edit area. You can have multiple razor edits. So let's just click into this and see the other options for creating razor edits. So just create, that's the default. Ignoring snap, we'll ignore snap to grid. Add to selection or from cursor. These two I've been able to get very comfortable with. As I use this more, as I find more things that I need to do with it, I'll definitely add those other things in there. We also have this button here to swap marquee and razor edit modifiers. So that could be a quick way to jump between different editing techniques and maybe not need to use so many keyboard modifiers. So once we have a razor edit, there are various things that we can do with left click. So left click default is no action. It's not going to move the edit cursor. It's not going to do anything. We just have a selection and we can click on it if we want. Other possibilities are remove one area, remove areas, delete area contents, split media items at edges, move area backwards, move area forwards, or we can call up an action. So we can add a script or things like that. We've got shift for split media items at area edges, control to move area forward, shift control to move area backwards, alt to remove one area, shift alt to remove areas, shift control alt to delete area contents. Let's try that out. So I'm going to make an area selection around an area with silence and partial audio items. I'm going to hit shift click, and that's going to split those items. Let's undo that. Let's do control click, and that's going to move it later in the timeline. And shift control click will move it backwards. Alt click will remove one of the tracks from that selection, or envelope lane from that selection. Shift alt will remove the entire selection. By the way, to remove an area selection, you can just click outside of it. With time selection, normally you're hitting escape to remove that. Shift control alt, shift, it's like all the modifiers. If you click on that, that's going to clear the contents of that. So let's do that again here. Shift control alt, click, and that's cleared that entire area. Pretty cool. For left drag, we've got move area. So let's look at that. We've seen this, but we can move this, and it's replacing other parts. Move area, ignoring snap. So snap to grid disabled. Copy areas, holding down control. So this is working the same as media items, but it's including that empty area. Now let's look at the razor edit edge. So we can move edges, do it ignoring snap, or stretching edges, just stretch, or ignoring snap. So we've got this default on move edges, shift, move edges ignoring snap, alt for stretch areas, and shift alt for stretch areas ignoring snap. So there you go. That's where we're going to leave it. Lots of fun stuff with the razor edits. Very exciting, very powerful feature. Not something that is going to be my new default way of doing everything. I think for me, marquee items selection is the best way that works for me in most situations. But razor edits are definitely something that I will be using on music projects, not so much on dialogue heavy stuff. For podcasts, I think I used them once in my last podcast edit, and it wasn't completely necessary, but it did save some time in that particular situation. But there's a lot of situations where you're chopping up complex things, retiming things, duplicating, including silence. And I think that's one of the main benefits of using that one, where you want to keep the space and duplicate and clear out everything that was on the track already. It's awesome for that. If you have any questions about razor editing or anything else in this video, please leave them down below. Happy to come back to the razor editing video. May do a separate video just on that another time, because there's so much to cover with that. Yeah, thank you. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.